The Collyer brothers, New York's most infamous hoarders, and the Mansion of Death, the Collyer brothers. New York's most infamous hoarders and the Mansion of Death, March 21st, 1947, Harlem, New York City. The police receive an anonymous call. There is a dead body inside the Collyer Mansion at 2078 Fifth Avenue. The mansion, a 4-story brownstone near 128th Street, has been sealed shut for years. No one goes in, no one comes out. The windows are boarded. The doors are locked and barricaded. The neighbors know 2 brothers live there, Homer and Langley Collyer. Recluses, hermits. Nobody has seen them in years. When police arrive, they cannot get in. The front door is blocked from the inside. They try windows, all sealed. They try the basement, blocked. Finally, they break through a 2nd-floor window. An officer crawls inside. And he cannot move. The house is packed floor to ceiling with junk. Newspapers, boxes, furniture, machinery, baby carriages, 14 pianos, thousands of books, literally tons of garbage. The officer can barely squeeze through. He tunnels through the debris, crawling over mountains of trash, and then he finds Homer Collyer, dead, sitting in a chair, starvation and dehydration. But where's Langley? The police search the house. It takes days. They remove debris ton by ton. They find more junk, more bizarre collections. Booby traps rigged to fall on intruders, but no Langley. And then on April 8th, 18 days after finding Homer, they discover Langley's body, 10 feet from Homer, buried under a pile of newspapers and junk that had collapsed on him. He had been dead for weeks, crushed by his own hoard. Homer, blind and paralyzed, had been sitting in that chair starving to death while his brother's corpse rotted 10 feet away. This is the story of the Collyer brothers, how 2 wealthy, educated men descended into madness and squalor, and how their mansion became a tomb filled with 130 tons of garbage. The Collyer brothers were not always recluses living in filth. They came from wealth. Their father, Herman Livingston Collyer, was a prominent doctor. Their mother, Susie, came from a wealthy family. The family lived at 2078 Fifth Avenue, a beautiful 4-story brownstone in Harlem. In the early 1900s, Harlem was an upscale neighborhood. The Collyers were part of high society. Homer Collyer was born in 1881, Langley in 1885. Both were brilliant. Homer studied law at Columbia University, became a lawyer. Langley studied engineering at Columbia, a concert-level pianist, a talented inventor. They had everything: money, education, talent, social standing. But the family was deeply dysfunctional. Their parents fought constantly. Their father was controlling and abusive. Their mother was neurotic and paranoid. The parents separated in 1909. The mother stayed in the brownstone with Homer and Langley, and her paranoia infected the sons. She became convinced the world was dangerous and hostile. She stopped going out, stopped letting people visit. The brothers stayed to care for her. Susie Collyer died in 1929. By then, Homer and Langley were in their 40s. They had spent 2 decades isolated with their mentally ill mother. They never recovered. After her death, they retreated further, stopped working, stopped socializing, started accumulating things, and they never stopped. Through the 1930s, the Collyer brothers became completely isolated. They stopped paying bills, the utilities were shut off, electricity, gas, water, phone. They did not care. They just adapted. No electricity? Langley rigged kerosene lamps. No heat? They wore layers of clothing. No water? Langley walked to a public pump blocks away and carried water back in jugs. They stopped allowing visitors, blocked the doors, boarded the windows, sealed the house, and they started hoarding. Langley believed Homer, who had gone blind in the 1930s, would regain his sight someday. So he saved every newspaper. Homer would need to read them to catch up on what he had missed. Langley saved decades of newspapers, stacked floor to ceiling, thousands of them. He collected broken machines thinking he would fix them. Sewing machines, typewriters, engines, radios. He never fixed any of them. 14 pianos. Langley was a talented pianist. He bought broken pianos cheap, planning to restore them. He never did. Furniture, boxes, junk from the street. If it was free, Langley took it. Brought it home, piled it somewhere. The house filled up, room by room, floor by floor. 1940s, you could not walk through most of the house. There were only narrow tunnels through the debris. Langley crawled through them to get from room to room, and he rigged booby traps throughout. Langley was paranoid. He believed people were trying to break in, so he built traps, piles of junk balanced precariously, heavy objects rigged to fall on intruders. The mansion became a labyrinth. Dangerous, impossible to navigate unless you knew the paths, and only Langley knew the paths. By the 1940s, the Collyer mansion was infamous in Harlem. The neighbors knew something was wrong. The house was sealed, dark, silent. But occasionally, late at night, someone would spot Langley, creeping out of the house, dressed in ragged clothes, collecting junk from the street, scavenging. He would gather newspapers and boxes and scrap metal, drag it back to the house, disappear inside. The police were called multiple times. Welfare checks, complaints about rats, about the smell. Officers would knock. No answer. They would try to enter. Blocked. Without evidence of a crime, they could not force entry. The brothers owned the house. If they wanted to live as hermits, that was their right. So the police left, and the legends grew. People said the brothers had millions hidden in the house. Gold, cash, valuables. People said the house was haunted, cursed. People said Homer was dead, and Langley was living with the corpse. That last rumor turned out to be close to the truth. March 21st, 1947. The New York Police Department receives an anonymous call. There is a dead man in the Collyer house. 2078 Fifth Avenue. Officers arrive, knock on the door, no answer. Try to force entry. Something is blocking it from inside. Finally, officers break through a second-floor window. Patrolman William Barker volunteers to climb inside. He squeezes through the window and immediately gets stuck. The room is packed solid with junk, floor to ceiling. Barker starts digging, pushing debris aside, creating a tunnel, crawling forward inches at a time through narrow passages over piles of junk. And then he finds Homer Collyer, sitting in a chair, dead, wearing a tattered bathrobe, his long white hair and beard filthy and matted, emaciated, skin and bones. He had starved to death. But where is Langley? The search takes weeks. You cannot walk through the house. There are no hallways, no clear rooms, just tunnels through debris. The police start removing junk ton by ton, carrying it out through windows, piling it on the street. Crowds gather. Thousands of people watching as the debris piles up on Fifth Avenue. The findings are extraordinary. 14 pianos, thousands of books, over 25,000 newspapers dating back decades, human organs preserved in jars from their father's medical practice, multiple car parts, the entire skeleton of a horse. Nobody knows where it came from. Baby carriages, weapons, gas masks, dressmakers' dummies, hundreds of yards of fabric, tons of scrap metal, but no Langley. Theories spread. Maybe Langley escaped. Maybe he killed Homer and fled. And then on April 8th, 18 days after Homer's body was found, they discover Langley, 10 feet from Homer, buried under a collapsed pile of newspapers and debris. He had been dead for weeks, longer than Homer. The coroner pieces together what happened. Langley had been bringing food to Homer. Homer was blind and paralyzed. He depended entirely on Langley for everything. Langley would tunnel through the debris and navigate the paths and bring Homer food and water every day. But Langley had rigged booby traps throughout the house. Around March 9th or 10th, 1947, Langley was crawling through one of the tunnels, bringing food to Homer. He triggered one of his own traps. A massive pile of junk collapsed on him. Newspapers, boxes, heavy debris. It buried him completely. He was trapped, crushed. He could not move, could not call for help, could not escape. He suffocated under the debris. 10 feet from Homer, Homer, blind and paralyzed, sat in his chair, waiting for Langley to bring food, but Langley never came. Homer could not move, could not see, could not get help. He starved to death slowly, over days, sitting in that chair, 10 feet from his brother's corpse. Both of them killed by the hoard they had spent decades accumulating. It took the city weeks to clear the Collyer mansion. They removed 130 tons of debris, over 260,000 pounds of junk accumulated over decades. The estate was worth about $100,000, over a million in today's money. It went to distant cousins the brothers had never spoken to. The mansion was demolished, the lot sat empty for years. Eventually, the city built a small park on the site, Collyer Brothers Park, the only memorial to two men who died alone, crushed and starved by their own minds. The Collyer brothers became legendary. Their story spread nationally. The hermit millionaires, the mansion of death, the 130 tons of junk. The term Collyer Brothers syndrome entered medical vocabulary, now called hoarding disorder. But here is what gets lost in the legend. They were victims. Homer and Langley were not evil. They were not stupid. They were mentally ill, raised by an abusive father and a paranoid mother. Isolated for decades. Untreated mental illness spiraling completely out of control. They needed help. They never got it. And so they died. Alone, trapped in their own hoard. It still happens today. Every year people die in hoarding situations. Trapped, buried, crushed. Most are forgotten. The Collyer brothers are remembered because their case was so extreme. But they are not unique. They are just the most famous example of what happens when mental illness goes untreated and isolation becomes total. Homer was 65 years old when he died. Langley was 61. They had education and talent and wealth, and they died in squalor, crushed and starved in a mansion filled with garbage, because they built a prison out of newspapers and junk, and they could not escape it. That is the real tragedy of the Collyer brothers. Not the 130 tons of garbage, not the booby traps, not even the deaths themselves, but the decades of slow descent into a darkness that nobody stopped and nobody helped and nobody cared enough to interrupt until it was far too late.